Good morning, friends. First of all, I wish you happy Diwali, and I hope all of you, would have a great time. You would have all went to your homes and celebrated Diwali in an eco-friendly way. So let's come back and start with the week 22 of our program Samachar Manthan. Um, so this week, the first or the most important topic which you must all have read in the newspapers, and there have been a lot of op-eds and articles and discussions on TV on that, which is rift between RBI and government. So, as you know that recently uh, government has used Section 7 of the RBI Act, which we will discuss later on, which has never been used since independence. And the government and the RBI have been on deadlock. They have been deadlocked between RBI and the Ministry of Finance and the government on certain issues. So we will understand first of all the importance of independence of central bank. Then we will come to the contemporary issue, which is the rift between government and the RBI and the stand of both government and the RBI. So it is actually in news in last 6 months or 1 year that the government, not just in India but many parts of the world, are loggerheads with the central bank of those countries. So we have example of Trump, who has criticized the Federal Reserve for raising the interest rate. We have an example of ECB or the European Central Bank chief, who is saying that the ECB needs to be saved from the government interference. We have example of Turkey, where Turkey has been, or the Erdogan government has been accused of compromising the independence and neutrality of the Central Bank of Turkey. Then we have example of India. So why is it common for the government and the RBI to have rift? It's not just in India, it's everywhere in the world. It's very common for the government and the RBI to not to be on the same page. First reason is that the objectives of government and the RBI differ, or the central bank differ. In a democracy, the government is elected by the government, but the central bank is not an elected body. It's a bureaucratic institution which does not have to face any election. So in a democracy, every government wants re-election, which means it is motivated by short-term interests. In every country, the term of a government is either 4 years or 5 years. So government, after 2-3 years, it knows that it has to fight elections after next 2-3 years. Therefore, even though in long run, if any policy creates inflation, but in short run it benefits the corporates and the common people, the government would definitely propose that kind of policy, while the central bank has a long-term objective because it does not have to fight elections. Its mandate in most of the country is to control inflation. Therefore, central bank has a long-term perspective, and it does not want any kind of populism, because it knows that populism will raise the inflation expectations in the long run. That is the main reason why the RBI and the government have been in conflict. If you remember the period of the last government, UPA, between 2009 to 2012, 13 times RBI has increased the rates of repo rates and the CRR. And at that time, the finance ministry blamed the RBI for the slowdown in the growth process, because you know that the growth slowed down between 2012 to 2014. The finance ministry held RBI's monetary tightening responsible for the slowdown in the economic growth, because the government blamed that because of increase in the repo rate, it has increased the interest rate in India to a very high level, which has discouraged the corporates from investment. So let us now understand the importance of independence of central bank. So we need an independent central bank for a reason that I have already discussed, because government tends to make poor decision with respect to monetary policy, because government would always want liquidity to be high in the economy, because high liquidity would mean people will have more money in themselves and the interest rate will be lower, which means the corporates will invest more. So it will create a demand in the economy. So therefore we require the independence of central bank in order to ensure that monetary policy is conducted on professional lines. Because in those countries where central bank has not been independent, we have seen hyperinflation. Zimbabwe is the biggest example. Mugabe, was in full control of the central bank. It told him to print more and more and more currency, which ultimately made the Zim dollars worthless. It happened in Argentina. So we have empirical evidence which clearly points out that in those countries where the government interfered in the central bank, it has faced disaster in the long run. Second reason why we need independent central bank is because independent central bank has more credibility. Which means that the foreign investors will continue to invest in India because they believe the central bank is independent. It also means that when central bank, through its repo rate, through its CRR, gives an indication that it wants this kind of policy, the market participants will actually accept it, right? Now, what are the concerns, or why is independent central bank dangerous? Well, as the people from the government side point out, the central bank has sole focus on controlling inflation. But in some countries like India, where inequality of wealth, where poverty, where unemployment, where growth is a bigger issue, the overemphasis of the central bank on inflation, it kind of ignores or neglects those other pressing issues which require much more attention than inflation. So the democratic government says that if central bank is too independent, it remains out of touch with the pressing needs of the country. So this is the argument from the government side, that central bank should not be completely independent. Second argument is that central bank is not an elected body. And in a democracy, it should be the elected body which should take both the fiscal and the monetary decisions on the behalf of the people. So this is the second argument why the people from the government side believe that the independent central bank is not exactly required in a democracy, and government should have some control over the functioning of the central bank. So let's now look at the recent standoff of the RBI and the central government in India. Now please listen to what I say very carefully, because there will be some technical words used and I will explain them, but you have to listen to what I said very carefully. First reason is control over PSB or public sector bank. So when the Nirav Modi incident took place, the central bank or the finance minister Jaitley, it actually said that the response, it's a failure on the RBI part, because RBI is the regulator of the banking sector. So it is the failure on their part that they could not check the malfunctioning and the mismanagement which was going on in the PNB bank. While the RBI responded that we don't have enough powers to exactly micromanage the functioning of the sector banks. The RBI also said that since the dominant shareholder of PNB is the government, it is the responsibility of the dominant shareholder to scrutinize or to check whether the board or the functioning of the PNB is going on in a smooth way or not. So ultimately, government being the dominant shareholder in PNB, it is the government's responsibility, or it was the failure of the government part when this Nirav Modi scam took place. So therefore RBI said that if you want us to have a good or to ensure that future incidents do not take place, you give us enough teeth to micromanage the functioning of the PSBs. The second issue on which they are fighting is PCA framework. So PCA is prompt corrective action, and this RBI has introduced that for the weaker banks, the bank which have more NPA problems. So after the bank says, suppose the RBI says that bank X has a lot of NPA, it has given a lot of bad loans, so prompt corrective action is introduced in that bank, which would mean that bank X would be prevented from issuing further loans. It will be prevented from issuing further deposits. It will have to keep more reserve ratio as prescribed. It will have to, the capital adequacy ratio for that bank will also be more severe. Ultimately, it would mean that the RBI would have a greater control over the deposit taking and the lending taking and the day-to-day activities of that bank. So government is saying that by introducing PCA over 11 banks in India, you are actually preventing them from giving credit to those areas which require some credit. And as you know that the credit ratio in India, which is a signal or indicator of how much demand is there in the economy, have been falling over the last 2-3 years. And government has blamed RBI responsible for that. Government says if you would have not introduced the PCA framework, then the 11 banks on which it has been introduced, they would have been giving more lending, they would have given more credit, and that would have boosted growth in certain areas of the economy. The RBI on the other hand is saying that you are a dominant shareholder of those banks. So if you want those banks to lend more, you should do some capital infusion on those banks. But you do capital infusion on those banks, and then the capacity of the bank to lend will increase, and we will put these banks out of the PCA framework. So that is what RBI is saying, that with a weak capital and with already having the NPA problem, we cannot allow those banks, or we cannot allow NPA problem to become worse in these banks. Therefore, if you want them to lend, you infuse more capital infusion. You introduce more capital infusion in those banks. Next is the NPA problem or the NPA rules. So RBI in February has exactly brought out a new NPA rules, according to which if the corporates have a single, if they delay in returning principal and amount to the, or principal and the interest to the creditor, then the RBI has said that a resolution process or the resolution plan can be invoked, which means suppose there is corporate X who has delayed by a single day in giving back the principal and the interest of the loan it has taken, then RBI has said that creditors can invoke a resolution plan under the insolvency and the bankruptcy code just by a single day. If a corporate is delayed in giving loan, so the government is saying that this is hurting the corporate sentiments. And also most of the companies which have faced this rule, they are usually the power producers, and most of these power producers have a very good connection with the government, and they are actually forcing the government to tell the RBI that please, this rule is very draconian, and therefore it will hurt the corporate sentiments in the country, and this will actually slow down the industrial growth in India. The RBI on the other hand has refused to back down, and it says that this is necessary because otherwise these corporates will keep on delaying the payment of the interest and the principal for some excuse or the other, and it says that this will have a deterrent effect on the corporates to give their loan on time. Next is use of section 7. So section 7 is a very, very extraordinary provision given in the RBI Act. So see, RBI technically is a part of the government because government is a dominant shareholder in the RBI. But RBI has been given, under the RBI Act, it has been given autonomy from the government because in a mature democracy, the fiscal policy is run by the Ministry of Finance and the monetary policy is run by the specialized professional central bank. So section 7 has been an extraordinary measure which has been given to the government, and in which the government can give directions to the RBI for public interest. So for in a very difficult circumstances, the government can invoke section 7 of the RBI Act, and when the section 7 of the RBI Act will be invoked, the government has been given power that it can give directions to the RBI on what to do, what not to do. So after section 7 will be introduced or invoked, the government will give directions to the RBI, and there will be central board of directors which will be established by the government, and those central bank of directors will ensure that the directions given by the government would be implemented. So in a normal circumstances, the government has no right, it has no power to give any direction to the RBI because RBI is an autonomous body. But when the section 7 has been invoked by the government, then it will be mandatory for the government to follow the directions given by the government. So ultimately, sections, if the government uses section 7, it means that the autonomy of the central government is diluted. And it has never been invoked in India since independence, whether it was 1991 crisis, whether it was 2008 recession, when the government and the RBI came in at loggerheads, but still the government did not use section 7. First time since independence this extraordinary measure have been used. That is why central bank is not happy, because once that section is used, it means that central bank is now a office of the government. Right. Next issue is the independent payment regulator. So this I have already uh, covered in the last lecture that the government has proposed independent payment regulator for the payment bank sector, but the RBI believes that it's a stupid move, and it is better that this sector also remains under the regulatory environment of the RBI. Next, and very important, is the RBI's reserves and surplus issue. This is very, very important, and you have to let me explain it differently because it's a little technical to understand. So you must have read in newspaper that RBI, that government wanted, the dividend from the RBI, which RBI refused. And the reason why government wanted dividend, because the elections are coming, so government wanted to spend, to use some populist scheme, and for that it need money. So it told RBI to give its surplus to the government. So see, how does RBI generate surplus? RBI, as you know, is a non-profit body, but RBI has both the liabilities and the assets. So when we talk of liabilities, there are two main liabilities which RBI have. One is the currency note which it prints, and second is the reserves which the bank have in the bank or in the RBI. So CRR, SLR, etc. And on the asset side, the RBI invests in both domestic bonds and in international bonds. So when we talk of liabilities, the liability in the case of liabilities, RBI does not have to pay any interest for the liabilities. So it does not pay any interest for the reserve ratio. It does not pay any interest for the currency notes which it issues or it prints. While on the case of asset, the RBI gets interest income from both the domestic bonds which it has and the international bond it has. So technically, the RBI is in profit, and that profit, after meeting the expenses required for the RBI to run its offices, the salary payment, etc., is approximately 65,000 crores every year. And since the government is the main shareholder of the RBI, it's a government owned, RBI is a government owned company, so this surplus, most of this surplus is given to the government every year. So when the government takes away all the surplus every year, and it's been happening from last 2 decades, whether it was a UPA government or this government, then why there is such a problem? There is such a problem because this time government has demanded not just the normal surplus, but it also wants special surplus from the RBI. And the special surplus will only be given when RBI prints more notes. So जो हर साल RBI को मिलता, जो हर साल गवर्नमेंट को मिलता था, वो तो इस साल भी RBI ने दे दिया. वो, that is not an issue. The issue is that government wants more surplus than which the RBI gives every year. Now RBI is concerned that if it will print more notes, it will create an inflation problem in the economy. Because RBI is not going to face election. RBI is a body, it's a bureaucratic body which is non-elected. And it has a long-term perspective. Therefore, the RBI has refused to give special surplus to the government. And this has irked the government, because government wanted this special surplus for the populist scheme it wants to create just before the elections. So this is the crux of dispute between the RBI and the government. So this ends the first issue of the week, which is drift between RBI and the government. So India and Japan recently signed a 75 billion currency swap agreement. So this agreement has been signed. So before we go into the agreement, let's first understand what do we mean by bilateral swap agreements. So it means it is an arrangement between two friendly countries which have a regular, substantial or increasing trade to basically involve in trading in their own local currencies, where both pay for import and export trade at the predetermined rate of exchange without bringing in third country currency like the US dollar. So if we just understand in a layman language, suppose India and Japan, which have has done a currency swap of $75 billion. Then it means that if India takes loan from Japan, then India will have the option to repay the loan in rupees. Similarly, if Japan trades with India, usually the trade between two countries takes place in dollars, which is an international currency. When two countries have a currency swap agreement, in that scenario, Japan can also pay for its import from India in yen rather than paying in dollars. So ultimately, both the countries save each other, or both the countries save the hard currency, which is dollar, in the trading system. The second meaning of this swap agreement is that if suppose India and Japan face a short-term liquidity mismanagement, which means we have a shortage of dollar in the economy. In that case, the Central Bank of India can go to the Japanese Central Bank and say, see, we are facing a dollar crunch, so we are paying you this rupees and you give us 75 billion worth of dollars. So if the Central Bank of India wants $75 billion, it has to give him that worth of rupee to Japan. So Japanese Central Bank will take that rupee and it will give dollars to India. Same can happen with Japan. If Japan is facing a problem of lack of dollars, then what it can do is that it can pay India yen, and Indian Central Bank will pay dollar of that worth to the Japanese Central Bank. This is the whole idea about the bilateral swap agreement. So why did India went for this swap agreement? Well, there are a number of reasons why India went for the swap agreement. अगर नहीं समझ में आया तो मैं फिर समझाता हूं कि दो कंट्री आपस में ट्रेड करती हैं, दे ट्रेड इन डॉलर्स. जब स्वैप एग्रीमेंट हो गया, इसका मतलब यह है कि दो कंट्रीज के नाउ, अगर 75 बिलियन का हुआ है तो 75 बिलियन तक दो कंट्रीज आपस में ट्रेड कर सकती हैं, या फिर वो ट्रांजैक्शन कर सकती हैं इन द लोकल करेंसी, नॉट इन डॉलर्स. ऐसे ही अगर कोई देश में, कोई भी कंट्री में डॉलर की किल्लत आ गई है तो वो दूसरे देश से अपनी लोकल करेंसी देके डॉलर ले सकता है. So this is the whole idea about this currency swap agreement. Now, why currency swap? Well, this is because the rupee has been depreciating. So rupee has depreciated by 13% since the start of 2018, and this swap agreement is a measure to give confidence to the investors that, see, we have done a swap agreement now with Japan, so you don't have to worry. We have enough dollars, and if there will be shortage of dollars, we will go to Japan and Japan will give us the dollars. Secondly, India is giving a message that we can do the trade transaction in rupees also, so we don't actually need the dollars for that. So therefore the dollars that we have is sufficient for India to trade. Therefore don't panic, we are safe. Second reason why it did is because the RBI's foreign currency reserves have shrunk. So it was 426 billion in the start of the year. Now it is 395 billion. Thirdly, it will help India to pay back its borrowing from Japan in rupees. So as you know that Japan has given India a lot of loans in the bullet trains, in the DMIC, and we have to repay the loan. It will be better if we repay the loan in rupees rather than in dollars. Because ultimately, see, the problem is that if dollar, so we have taken loan from Japan in dollars, and if rupee falls in dollars, suppose right now 1 rupee is 72, or sorry, $1 is 72 rupees, and we have taken 10 billion loan from Japan. And after 5 years, when we have to repay the loan, the $1 equals to 100 rupees. So the loan we have to repay to Japan will increase. It's better if we say that, okay, Japan, we will repay you the loan. We will repay you the 10 billion loan that we have taken to you in rupees at the current price. So the current price is 72. 10 billion dollars means 72,000 crores. So we will repay those 72,000 crores after 5 years in rupees. Right, so it saves India from the foreign exchange risk. Foreign exchange risk means that if rupee depreciates, the loan which Indians have taken from outside, the loan amount that it will have to repay, its amount will increase. Right, so currency swap agreement saves India from this kind of uncertainty. Fourth reason why India went for the swap is to boost the investors' confidence in India's foreign exchange market. So this ends the second issue of the week, which is currency swap agreement. Let's move to the third issue, which is op-ed related to the migration. So this op-ed deals with the migration problem that we have. So I will, in the next lecture, I will discuss the yojana of October, and the next lecture I will be discussing the Kurukshetra of last month. This week I am not discussing any of them. I will complete them next week and next to next week. So this talks with the migration problem that we have and why we need a migration policy in India. So the op-ed says that migration in India takes place because of two reasons: the pull factors and the push factor. The push factor means that because of agrarian distress, the people in rural India have no option but to migrate to urban areas for sustenance. The pull factor means that because of higher paying jobs in urban areas and good standard of living in urban areas, it motivates the people in rural areas to migrate to urban areas. They are not doing by force, they are doing by their own choice. So in India, most of the reason why people migrate, it is a combination of both pull factors and the push factors. So what have been the positive effects of migration in India? So when we talk of positive effect of migration, it has the data shows that it has increased the consumption and it has lifted more families out of absolute poverty in the origin. This is the since when somebody migrates, it sends remittances back home, which increases the consumption of those living in house in villages, and it also has led to many families which were BPL to move out of poverty. Also, increased migration has resulted in increased well-being of the households. Also, it has led to it has increased the earning of those belonging to lower caste and tribes. Also, it has it has improved the credit worthiness of the family in the rural areas. Since with the remittances, the families are able to pay back the loan, which means that the family, where the banks they give loan to those families which have somebody working in the cities in a good paid job. Fourthly, it has also improved the health and education outcomes of those who are living in the rural areas. Now, what are the negative effects? The first negative effect is that it has led to rise in urban informal economy. And how is the urban informal economy? So those who migrate to cities, hardly 5 or 6% find a good job, because the capacity of the as I have discussed in the earlier lectures, that the growth in India is led by the service sector, and in service sector it is led by IT and telecom. Both of them are not job creators, so we are not creating enough jobs for the transition to take place. So a person who migrates to urban areas finds that there is no formal job for him. So ultimately what he does is that he drives rickshaw, he starts his own small stall. This is what he do. And these people do not have any labor rights, they do not have any labor protection, they do not have any access to healthcare, they don't have any access to any of things, any of the safeguards, which any of the labor laws which the government has brought out for the welfare of the labor. Second issue is search cost. So only 20% of those who migrate have been able, or they have a job before they migrate. Rest of them have to search the job in the cities. So there's a search cost involved. I mean, you have to run from here to here, which actually is a costly process. It's not free. You have to take a bus, you have to take a metro, you have to, print your, so many things you have to do to find a job. It takes a time, right? So it's a costly process. Second thing is that when you are in city, you're outside the PDS system, you are outside the free healthcare system, you are outside the education system, and this also involves cost on you, because if you are sick, you have to go to a clinic for which you have to pay. If you want the ration, you have to your ration card is of the home, so you don't get PDS grain. You have to go to a shop and buy the grain. So, and also to meet expenses, you have to take loan from the employer, and it means that you have to sell your assets to repay the loan. All of these are ill effects of migration. Thirdly, there is also a new form of discrimination. Which means that those who are in a higher pedestal in the rural areas, these people are more likely to have a good links in the urban areas. They might have brother, they might have nephew, they might have anyone. They might have friend who is working in a good post in city, and therefore these people, their migration is much more smoother, and they are more likely to have a high paying job. They are more likely to have a more sustainable job. And when we compare it to those who are at the lower echelons in the rural areas, they are more likely to end up in a very small paying, very kind of exploitative job. So, this is a new kind of discrimination, that the kind of social status that you have in the rural areas, it also reflects in the kind of job you will find in the urban areas. So what are the steps we need to smoothen the process of migration in India? So firstly, we need a national migration policy. So we have a policy for the poor people, we have the policy for the urban poor, we have a policy for rural poor, but we don't have a dedicated policy for the migrant population. As you know, that migrants face a lot of problem because they have different requirements. They are outside the ambit of government welfare schemes. They don't have ID proof through which they can avail the government services. So we need a policy for the migrant population dedicatedly focused on meeting or on solving the issues being faced by the migrant population. Also, the other steps which we can take is we can involve the local bodies and the NGO in training the migrant population and also in looking at the problems being faced by the migrant population. Another thing we can look at is improving the skill development of those who want to migrate, because if they will be provided with right skills, they would not end up in low paying unskilled informal job. So next is skill development. Also, we need to separate those who are migrating because of pull factors and those who are migrating because of push factors, and separate policies and initiatives should be launched for those migrants who have migrated for this reason and the other reason. Also, we need to differentiate between individual migrant and the household migrant. So, an individual migrant is if a single person has migrated. A household migrant is when whole the family has migrated. So therefore, the requirements of a household migrant is different. You need a 1 BHK. You need the kids to be sent to school. Your requirements are more. An individual migrant, on the other hand, has less requirements. So both of these, because the requirements are different, they have to be treated differently by the government. So this ends this third issue, which is an open. Now let's move to the next issue, which is the ease of doing business in India. Or India is ranked 77 in the World Bank's ease of doing business report. Let's move to the other main topic, which is India is ranked 77 in the World Bank's ease of doing business report, and we have improved from 100 last year. So first, let's look at the key parameters on which the World Bank's ease of doing business report is based on. So there are 10 different parameters. First is starting a business. Second is dealing with construction permits. Third is getting electricity. Fourth is registering property. Fifth is paying taxes. Sixth is getting credit. Next is trading across borders. Enforcing contract. Resolving insolvency. And lastly, protecting minority investors. So these are the 10 parameters on which the World Bank's ease of doing business report is based on, and India has improved in 6 parameters. So last year India's rank was 100. This year it is 77, and this is the highest. This is one of the highest rank improvement that any large economy has undergone in last 2 years. So we moved from 130 to 100 last year, and now we have moved to 77. So let's now look into those areas on which India's ranking improved. So when we talk of construction permit, India's ranking improved from 181 to 52. So this is because of single window clearance, because the ease of doing business index is based on only two cities, Delhi and Mumbai. Rest of the cities are not taken into account. So the Delhi government has came out with a single window clearance for granting the construction permit, and Mumbai has launched online, everything will be done online with respect to construction permit. That is why we have improved the ranking from 181 to 52. Next is trading across the border. So here our ranking improved from 146 to 80, and this is because of number of steps taken by the government with respect to exports. So trading across border means how simple is the import and export process of a country is. So we have, as you know, that we have reduced the number of forms. We have launched this MEIS and SEIS scheme. We have brought in the concept of self-certification, where an exporter and importer does not need to take a permission, rather he has to just self-certify. So all these steps, we have simplified the form. So all these steps have improved the ranking of India from 146 to 80. Next is starting a business. So in this we have improved from 156 to 137. For starting a business, we have launched GST, which has simplified the process. We have launched Startup India. So all those have started. We have reduced the number of permissions to be taken for starting a business. We have the government has brought this online mechanism where you can get online approvals. Next is getting a credit. For that, our ranking improved from 29 to 22. And this has improved because of number of schemes launched by the government like MS, like Mudra, etc. Next is getting electricity. In this, our ranking improves from 29 to 24. This is also because of the steps taken by the government in Delhi and Mumbai to ease the process of getting an electricity connection. Next is enforcing contracts. In this, our ranking improved just 164 to 163. For this, government has brought out commercial courts, which is a dedicated court which will solve the contract disputes in India. So these are the 6 areas where India has improved its ranking. Now there are some areas where India has to improve its ranking, and these areas are paying taxes, resolving insolvency, registering property, enforcing contract. Also we have improved just 1, so we are ranked 163. Starting a business, we are ranked 137. These are the areas where we have to improve our ranking. So why does India rank low on starting a business? So India is ranked low because other countries have launched very significant measures, and secondly, this starting a business is based on how much money is required to start a business with respect to the per capita income of an individual. So since per capita income of an Indian entrepreneur is very less, therefore the cost of starting a business is high. I mean the ratio is high. That is why we are ranked low in the starting a business thing. So how will this rank improve? This rank, or how will this rank help? This rank will help because it gives a positive sentiments to the investor that the government in India is doing a lot in improving the ease of doing business, and therefore it is a good investment destination. Therefore it will motivate the investors to invest in India. So what are the problems in the ease of doing business rankings? So this ease of doing business ranking has not been taken very seriously by number of economists because of the inherent flaws that ease of doing business ranking has. So let's now look at the inherent flaws which ease of doing business ranking has. First is that only two cities are taken as benchmark: Mumbai and Delhi, and these are two most developed cities in India. Therefore, through this ranking, we do not know whether the small or the 3 tiers or the 2 tiers or the 4 tiers cities, whether the ease of doing business is being improved on those cities or not. Second issue with this is that several labor related issues, labor reforms, day-to-day management of business, the various demands by the inspectors, labor inspectors of quality, these processes are not captured by these rankings. Thirdly, this ranking or this report does not capture other important issues like input costs, infrastructure issues, demand costs. In all these areas, India functions really poor. So it does not, it also ignores input cost, infrastructure issues, etc. Also, other issues which the business in India face are poor skills, corruption, employability, and all these front India again ranks poorly. So these issues which are very important for starting a business, for running a business, like corruption, poor skills, and employability are also ignored by this index. Also, only the quantitative factors are measured by this report or index. The qualitative factors are ignored. What are the qualitative factors? These include the institution. So the health and education indexes of the country, the political climate, the robustness of its institutions. Like for example, we have recent incidents of CBI getting diluted. We have examples of RBI getting diluted. These also somehow indirectly affects the ease of doing business in India. So these qualitative factors are also ignored by the ease of doing, or they are also ignored by the ease of, and then activities of the fringe elements, like we have seen in Gujarat, where the laborers, by the way the locals are beating laborers or the migrants. So all these adversely affect the ease of doing business, and these are not captured by the ease of doing business index. Therefore, the experts are saying that we should not be too happy with this index, because first of all, the regional dimension is there. It just measures two cities, and also it ignores a lot of other important issues which affect the business and which India is doing poorly, but these index do not measure that, and that is why we have such a high ranking in the index. So the experts are saying that we should also focus on improving those areas which are not measured by the index but which plays a dominant role in creating the environment of ease of doing business. Let's move to the next issue, which is Prime Minister's initiatives for the MSME sector. So MSME sector, and in India, is very important as it employs. It is the most largest employer after agriculture, And there are four main issues which the MSME sector has been facing, and the Prime Minister has launched initiatives for improvement in all these four issues which the MSME sector is facing. So these issues which MSME sector are facing are access to credit, access to market, technology upgradation, and the ease of doing business. So when we talk of access to credit, government has launched 59-minute loan portal. So it does not mean that in 59 minutes you will get the loan. It means that if you submit your salary slip, your past track record, all these things online, then the bank in 59 minutes will give in principle approval to you that yes, you are eligible for 1 crore loan, you are eligible for 50 lakh loan. After that, you will have to go to the bank to fulfill to fulfill the necessary regulations and the processes. So in 59 minutes, you will get an in principle approval from the bank side that yes, you meet the criteria of getting the loan. Next is that there will be 2% interest subvention for all the MSMEs who are registered in the GST platforms. Next is trades compliance. Now, a lot of or 2 or 3 students have messaged me with the thing that what is this trades compliance or what is trade. So see, let's understand this thing. MSME, suppose it sells a good to a corporate. Now usually the corporate does not pay them instantly, but the corporate tells them, okay, when these goods will be sold and we'll get the revenue, we will sell you or we will pay back you the amount after 2 months. So suppose on 1st January the MSME has sold the group to the corporate. The corporate has said that I will pay you back on 15th of February. And the corporate gives the bill of exchange to the MSME that yes, I have taken this amount of good from this particular MSME, and next month on 15th of February I will pay back this amount. I will pay back the amount for this good to the MSME. Now MSME has faced a cash problem because it has to take loan from the banks for further production. It needs cash to buy goods, it needs cash to buy more inputs, it needs cash to buy machines, it needs cash to pay to the laborers, it needs cash to buy the raw materials, but his payment will come after 1.5 months. So for that, the corporate gives the MSME this bill of exchange which I was talking about, and then MSME goes to the bank and says that please give me kind of some loan and I have this bill of exchange, and when this bill of exchange will be cleared, you get all the money. So suppose corporate the MSME has sold 1 lakh rupees of good to the corporate sector, and that corporate company gives the bill of exchange to the MSME which certifies that yes, I will pay 1 lakh rupees to him on 15th of February next month. Now MSME will go to the bank, suppose it goes to the SBI bank and tells, see, this is 1 lakh rupees I will get next month. So please give me 98,000 rupees on this behalf. Because the MSME wants the 98,000 rupees to buy inputs for the further production, right? The SBI will accept this because SBI will get 1 lakh rupees from that corporate on 15th February. So SBI will earn the profit of 2,000 rupees, and MSME will have the profit that it will not have to wait for 1.5 months. It will instantly get the cash from the bank. Right, and then bank will be liable to take this 1 lakh rupees from the corporate sector. So both are benefiting, right? But the problem is that it's very difficult for the MSME sector to run to every bank for this deal. So to ensure that the MSME sector gets the best deal, government has came up with trade platform. It's an online platform. So in this trade platform, there will be all the banks which will be there. All the banks or all the financiers which will be there. And suppose the MSME person wants to take finance from these banks. Now what MSME will do, it will go to the trade platform and it will say, see, and it will upload its bill of exchange and it will say, see, I will be getting 1 lakh rupees next month and I need a finance right now instantly. Who are ready for that? Then all these banks will bid with each other that we will give you 98,000, we will give you 98,200, we will give you 98,400. Somebody said that we'll give you 99,000. So the best bid which MSME will get, he will choose that, in which he will have to share less interest income with the bank, and he will choose that bid and instantly he will get the money from the financer. So पहले क्या होता था कि पहले MSME सेक्टर वाले बंदे को हर एक बैंक में जाना पड़ता था कि भैया मेरे पास ये है और आप मुझे कितना में दोगे, मतलब कितना आप मुझे लोन दोगे इसमें. अब क्या हो गया है कि he will have to sit at his home, he will just register in the trade platform and he will upload his bill of exchange, and then after that within 5 minutes the banks will give him the bid that we will give you this offer, we will give you this offer, and the MSME sector will choose the best offer and he will get the cash, and from this cash he will buy the inputs for the future production. So it has made the process more easier and the MSME will get the best deal from these banks. So what government has done now, that it has mandated that all the companies which have a turnover of more than 500 crores, they must be compulsory brought on the trades. So compulsory, those companies who have a turnover of 500 and above, they have to be compulsory registered on the trades platform. Next is access to market. So first is access to credit. For access to credit, government has launched two initiatives: 59-minute loan portal and the trades compliance scheme. For technology upgradation, for access to market, the PS or the PSUs who were earlier mandated that they will take 20% of their procurement of goods from the MSME, now it has been increased to 25%. 25% of their goods would be procured from the MSME sector, and 3% is now reserved for the women. Next is technology upgradation. So for this, Prime Minister Modi has announced that there will be tool rooms which will be established all over the country. Now tool rooms basically are places where the tools which are required for production are installed, and any MSME can borrow the tools from those. They can borrow the equipments from those tool rooms. So this will help the MSME in better production. They will use better tools which will improve the productivity of those MSME. Also, government has said that there will be cluster of pharma MSME which will be established, and the central government will pay 70% for establishing the 70% of the cost of that cluster will be borne by the central government. Next is ease of doing business. So for ease of doing business, the government has focused on simplification of government procedure. So now the return under the 8 labor laws and 10 union regulation must be filed only once a year. Abhi they were filed every month. Now they have to be filed once a year. Also, for establishing a unit, the entrepreneur needs just 2 clearances to establish. Also, the environment clearance and consent under air pollution and water pollution laws have been merged as a single consent and self certification. So for air pollution and for water pollution, abhi tak kya tha ki the entrepreneur will has to take separate permissions from the CPCB. Now it is merged into one, and the entrepreneur can self certify that it is not polluting based on random inspection. If in inspection it's fine, it's polluting, then he will have to pay the penalty. And lastly, for minor violations under the Companies Act, the entrepreneur will no longer have to approach the court, but they can correct them through simple procedure. So for minor violations, the entrepreneur will not be taken to court. So this ends the 5th issue of the week, which is a PM initiative for MSME sector. Next is promulgation of the Companies Amendment Ordinance 2018. So recently, the president has given approval to the ordinance for amending the Companies Amendment Act 2018, and the whole idea or the whole objective of this is to ensure that the NCLT, or the National Corporate Law or National Companies Law Tribunal, it is clogged with cases, and that reduces its functioning. So the whole objective of this amendment is to declog the NCLT with minor cases, because NCLT right now 90% of the cases which NCLT hears, these are very minor cases, and because of that it has less time to hear the serious issues. The serious cases of violation are pending for long years, they are pending for many years. Therefore, now under the ordinance, the minor cases will be handled by the regional directors of the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. So they will be in-house adjudication. Only the non-compoundable cases, which means in which there can be no case for kind of agreement. So there are two type of cases that I have discussed earlier also: compoundable and non-compoundable. Compoundable are the cases of minor violation which affects the private individuals, and in this cases there could be out of court settlement which means the both parties can agree and just withdraw the case. Second is non-compatible, which are cases of serious violation in which court have to hear the cases. So according to the amendment, around 16 out of 81 compoundable offences under the act, they have been given to the regional director. They will no longer be, these cases will no longer go to the NCLT. Also, the ordinance says that the penalty for has been reduced to half for small companies and one person companies, of that not applicable to the normal companies. Also, the ordinance says that that those directors who are directors of more than 20 companies, they would be disqualified. And also it says that the independent director's remuneration would be capped at 20% of his gross income from all the sources over the year. So now, earlier it used to be that the independent director's remuneration was so high that he had the interest of if suppose there is an independent director who functions in company X and his remuneration is very high, then he will see, because the job of independent director is to see whether the company's management and the CEO is is taking care of the shareholder, is taking care of the interest of the shareholder and the stakeholders. But if independent director is paid so heavily, he will choose to ignore the malfunctioning in the company, because he believes that if he will do that, he will be removed next time, and if he will be removed, he will lose a lot of money. So that is why, to ensure that independent directors remuneration does not dilute his responsibility, his remuneration is capped at 20% of his total gross income. So this ends the sixth issue. Let's move to the next issue, which is again a OPID. And this is an OPID by Rajmohan, which says India, China and the INF Treaty. So recently, Trump has announced that he will be withdrawing from the INF Treaty. And what do we mean by INF Treaty? So INF Treaty means Intermediate Range Nuclear Force Treaty. And this was signed between Gorbachev and Reagan, Mikhail Gorbachev and Reagan in 1987. And the whole objective of the treaty is to reduce the arm race between Soviet Union and USA. And this treaty played a very important role in ending of Cold War, because it increased the confidence between USA and Soviet Union. And the provision of this treaty was that the Soviet Union and the US will not develop, produce, possess or deploy any ground-based ballistic and cruise missiles that have a range between 500 to 5,500 kilometers. So neither countries will develop or test any missile, any ground-based missile which have a range of 500 to 5,500 kilometer. However, it exempted the air-launched and sea-based missile system. So what were the loopholes in the treaty? The single biggest loophole was that airborne and seaborne missile system were ignored. So a lot of intermediate range missiles from airborne and sea based missiles were tested during this period. Second loophole of this treaty was that it was only applicable to Soviet Union and USA. It was not applicable to other great powers like England, India, China, Israel, etc. And in last 30 years, China, India, Pakistan, North Korea, all of them developed a lot of intermediate range missiles. So nearly 90% of China's missile armory is based on is can be categorized at intermediate range. So why did US withdraw from the treaty? US withdraw because it said that Russia has been violating the treaty and it has tested intermediate range missiles many times. The biggest example is the BrahMos missile. But the experts are saying that it is not the Russian threat which has made US withdraw from the treaty, but it is the rise of China, or it is a threat from China which has motivated US to withdraw from the treaty, because US, as you know, is a security provider to most of the countries in the Far East, and they believe that China has now installed a lot of intermediate range missiles, which is hurting the interest, the strategic and the defense interest of these countries. And US, being bound by the treaty, it has not been able to deploy or test new kinds of missile in that region. So therefore, to counter China, US has said, or US has withdrawn from the treaty, because with this withdrawal, US will be able to build and test more kind of intermediate missiles in the Asia Pacific region, which will be able to counter the Chinese threat. So what would be the impact of this pan Asia, or what will be the impact of this move on India? So India, problem with India is that we are mostly dependent on Russia for developing the intermediate range missiles. But since now with US, launching sanctions against Russia, it will be difficult for India to continue with US or continue with Russia in developing the intermediate range missiles. And also Russia and China are also co-developing intermediate missiles. Therefore, India will have to look into the options of developing indigenous intermediate range missiles, because China has so many of them that it can always use against India, and it can destroy some of the regions of India. But India does not have large number of intermediate range missiles. Even Pakistan has a large number of missiles. So this could, this withdrawal of US could lead to arms race in Asia, where US will start building large number of intermediate range missiles, and in response China will also build more intermediate range missiles. Therefore, India will also have to look into building indigenous intermediate range missiles to counter the Chinese threats and to counter the more US kind of intervention in this area. This is what Raj Mohan is saying in the article. Now let's move to the next issue. which is also an OPED, universities and patents. So, UGC has recently said that all the universities in India should establish intellectual property centers, and these intellectual property centers will help in generating awareness about intellectual property, and it will help in creating or in generating more intellectual kind of property at the university level. So what are the constraints? So why are the universities need IP? Well, they need IP for various reasons. First of all, the patents help universities to improve their ranking. So whether it's the international rankings, whether it's the Indian rankings like NIRF, like NAC, like AICT rankings, in all these rankings they give special focus on how many patents this university has created. Based on that, it ranks a university. So if a university wants to improve its ranking, it will have to focus on generating more patents. Secondly, it leads to earning more additional revenue. Uh, so by selling those patents, the universities earn a lot of revenue, which it can use for giving further or building better infrastructure with respect to patents, and for building better infrastructure with respect to other things. Also, it creates a lot of job. So what are the problems? So even though the UGC has recommended that intellectual property centers should be established in every university, but according to the OPED, the universities will face a large number of hurdles in implementing this measure because of number of reasons. So India has shortage of IP professionals. Well, to run those IP centers, you need IP professionals. But in case of India, we do not have enough IP professionals, and the only IP professionals which is created in India is they are created by the law schools, and they are very few. Second issue that we will face is that we have a very poor patent agent density. So we have just 2000 patent agents in India, and what does they do? The patent agents help in filing the patent. It gives you all the information about the procedure. It kind of create awareness in the society about the role of patents, the laws, the procedures, except everything. So it smoothens the process of approval and granting of patent. In India's case, we have just 2000 registered patents. The reason being that central government only conducts one competitive exam in India to check person's proficiency to IP, and any science graduate can apply for the exam. Once you clear the exam, you can be registered as an IP agent. But this exam is held very unfrequently. That is why, and less number of people sit for the exam. That is why we have dearth of IP agents in India. So without having IP professionals and IP agents, the IP centers cannot work in the universities and it cannot produce enough patents in the country. So what are the steps we need? So steps we should need is that there should be frequency of exam of IP professionals should be increased. Secondly, we need to, those people who clear the exam, there should be a post qualification continuous education for them. And thirdly, there is need to increase awareness about this job opportunity, because we have so many science graduates in India who are jobless, but they don't know about the kind of, because there are few people, it pays you well. Therefore we need to create awareness so that more and more people give the exam with respect to the patent agent. So this ends this topic. Let's move to the last issue of the week, or last main issue of the week, which is actually opened in the EPW. So EPW opens, as I've told, I will cover at least one good open every week. So this is an EPW open. And it says that, is MSP a viable proposition in marine fisheries? So this was in news because the Kerala government has announced that there will be a MSP price for the fisher folks catch also from next year. So right now the MSP is announced for rice, wheat and 25 other crops. Kerala became the first state in India which introduced MSP for the fish, or for the producers of the fisher folks. So this OPIT deals with challenges which the government will face in implementing MSP, and the other viable alternatives which government can propose other than the MSP. So let's first look at the challenges in implementing the MSP. So first challenge is that it could catalyze resource depletion. See, India has a problem of overproduction, and that because of overproduction there are shortage of fish in India, and this is the problem which led to the dispute with Sri Lankans, because Indian farmers are now traveling far away to Sri Lanka to get the fish because they have overexploited the fish resources in the nearby. The regulation in India, the regulations are very weak. So we have sometimes the government have a seasonal ban on fishing. Sometimes there are few input specific controls. but we do not have a regulation. We do not have a regulation, or we do not have a control with respect to individual catch quota, which means how much one fisherman can catch. We don't have a collective catch quota, which means how much a village can catch. We do not have a vessel catch limits, which means how much fish can a vessel catch in a month. We don't have that. So we have a weak regulatory environment. If the government will announce MSP, it will motivate the farmer, it will motivate the fishermen to, to exploit more and more fisheries resources, and this will further deplete the already less remaining fisheries resources. This could create havoc. So the person who wrote the article, he says that first we have to bring out a strict regulation with respect to individual catch, group catch, and the vessel catch. Only then the MSP should be introduced, because without that it will lead to overcatching, it will lead to overfishing, which will be harmful for the environment. Second issue, or the second challenge, is systematic rigidities in the value chain. So यहाँ पे प्रॉब्लम क्या है कि a fisherman takes a loan from the auctioneer who auctions his fish in the market before he goes for catching the fish. So the fisherman buys equipments, etc. from from that money, but there is a contract signed that the fisherman will sell that product to the auctioneer. So auctioneer is kind of a middleman, right? So the auctioneer gives very less price for the fish, because it says that because I'm giving you the loan, so you have to give me the fish at this price, which means that the fisherman gets a very less amount of money for the produce itself. So suppose the price of fish is 10 rupees, the fisherman get only 1 rupees, and the rest of this the middleman appropriates. This is a very serious condition. So this is kind of this issue, or this problem cannot be solved by the MSP, because most of the fishermen already have a contract with the auctioneer to sell the fisheries, so it cannot sell to the government, right? Unless and until government arranges alternative credit mechanism for the fishermen, so that they don't have to rely on these auctioneers for the funds, it will have no impact on the condition of the fishermen, because even though MSP will be announced, the fishermen will not be able to sell the fish to the government, because it is bound by the contract to sell the fish product to the auctioneer, right? So most of the fishermen will not get benefit from the MSP hikes. Thirdly, there is practical problem in its implementation. So if the government announces that we will buy as much fish the farmers will sold to us, then fisheries is a perishable good. If you don't store them in a cold chain, within 2 days it will start rotting. So therefore, if the government wants to procure so much amount of fisheries, then it will have to create established cold chain infrastructure in the state. And right now the state does not have the required cold chain infrastructure. Without having the cold chain infrastructure, the government will have to face a lot of loss, because those fisheries, those fish which it will procure, it will go waste. Right. Also, we will need a proper commission which will fix the or which will determine the scientific MSP for the goods. Because for agriculture we have CSCP. For fisheries also we will require a separate professional body which will decide the price of the fish, and that is very difficult to determine in case of fish. So what are the possible alternatives to MSP? So the author says that there are a number of alternatives to MSP which government can introduce and which will have a greater impact on the condition of the fishermen. First is MIS slash price deficiency payment system. So rather than permanently intervening, the government can go for market intervention system. So इसमें क्या होगा in this, if a price falls below the market price or below the MSP price, or if the price falls below a level, then the government will intervene and government will procure the fish products from the fishermen. So there will not be a permanent procurement by the government. The government will only procure when the market prices would fall to a very low levels. There could also be the price deficiency payment system which could be used, in which if a price falls below the MSP, then what government can do, government can refund. So the difference between the MSP and the price and the market price will be transferred in the accounts of the fishermen by the government. So in both these cases, the government will not have to create lot of cold storage for storage, because the main problem is about storage. Where will you store? Because it's not like rice and wheat which can be stored for months. Here, if you don't sell them within 2-3 days, it will be it will go waste. So therefore, the government, if they use this method rather than MSP, then it will benefit the fishermen and it will solve the practical problems also. Also, the other steps which the government could take is to provide the right of fixing landing price to the fish cooperatives. So this is also kind of important, because this fish cooperative, because in Norway and Japan, usually it's not the auctioneer and the middleman, but it is the fish cooperatives who decide the price of the fish. Fish cooperatives are generally, it consists of fishermen, so they will take care of the interest of fishermen. Other thing which the government could do is that government could improve the landing center infrastructure. It could strengthen the cold chain system. It can strengthen the retail system. Next thing which it can solve is the dedicated funds for giving credit. So the main problem which we have understood in the last part was that the fishermen are dependent on the middlemen for the credit. Therefore, they get credit at a very uneconomical price. So the solution to this problem is to ensure that the government pays, if there is a separate institution which gives credit to the fishermen, then the fishermen will not be dependent on the middlemen, and they will be able to sell their products to anyone they like, right? So this ends the main issues for the week. Now let's look at the prelims issues of the week. So the first, India's first container movement on inland waterway begins. So recently, India's first container vessel movement on National Waterways 1 in the Ganga River between Kolkata to Varanasi began. So PepsiCo, they are sending their freight or their goods in a domestic boat, and it will travel from Kolkata to Varanasi, and from Varanasi it will again go back to Kolkata with fertilizer from the IFCO from Allahabad. So this is the first time we are having this commercial movement of vessels in any of India's national waterways. In Southeast Asia, in Europe, the inland waterways are very much developed for commercial transport, but in India's case it's not developed. Now government is focusing on that by declaring certain inland waterways as national waterways and developing other facilities in that. Next is Statue of Unity. I don't think I need to tell anything in that. You must have read it in news if it was there in every news. So you can read it from the news. Next is United Nations World Tourism Organization. So this was in news because 109th session of UNWTO Executive Council was held in Manama recently, and India also attended it. So this is a UN agency which is responsible for the promotion of responsible, sustainable and universally accessible tourism, and its executive council represents the organization's governing body. It meets at least twice a year, and it takes necessary steps to promote sustainable tourism in all the countries of the world. Next is this 19th meeting of FSDC, Financial Stability and Development Council. So what is there in the meeting? It's not important for your exam. What is important is FSDC, because UPSC has asked it, I think, last year. So the trivia specific fact of FSDC is that it was established in 2010. It is a non-statutory body, which means Parliament Act has not been passed for its approval. Its job or its objective is to coordinate between the fiscal policy in charge, the monetary policy in charge, and all the financial regulators in India. So idea is to balance between the macroeconomic prudentials and the financial sector stability. So its membership is also like that. So the chairperson of FSDC is the finance minister, and it has members from RBI. So RBI, the governor is a member. Then the secretary minister of corporate affairs is the member. Secretary Department of Financial Services is a member. Finance secretary is a member. The RBI, the governor, is also a member. The chief economic advisor is also a member. Next is cabinet has given nod for opening up solar alliances to all UN countries. So, International Solar Alliance was established by India and France in the Paris climate meeting in 2015, and it covers all the countries which are partially or fully lying between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. It includes 121 countries, and its objective is to give boost to solar energy so that it can act as so that the dependence on fossil fuel can be reduced. So recently the cabinet has approved, Indian cabinet, that its membership should be allowed to all the members of UN and not just countries lying between the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, because if all countries will be there, it will generate more funds for it. Next is railway rolls out all India unreserved mobile ticketing facility. So right now, if you want to book an unreserved ticket, you have to stand in a big line and then you have to take the ticket. That's very time consuming. So now government has said that you can buy, and also second is platform ticket. Again, big line. It's very kind of time consuming. So therefore, government has came out with the online getting of those tickets. So through online you can book a unreserved ticket in any of the non suburban trains. Also through online you can book the platform ticket, and that will save your time because you don't need to stand on in the queues. The idea is to promote 3 C's: the cashless transaction, the contactless less ticking, and the customer convenience and experience. So this app has been developed by the Indian Railways, CRIS. Next is the Ministry of Road Transport and Highway has mandated that vehicle locational tracking device and emergency buttons will be mandatory for all the new vehicles who will be registered from, or for all the public vehicles which will be registered from 1st January 2019. So it will be kind of mandatory for all. So except rickshaw and e-rickshaw, they will be excluded from that, except that in all the public transports you will require, or the developer of that product will have to install a vehicle locational tracking device and an emergency button, and the owner of the vehicle will have to ensure that it is working properly, that it is in a working condition. So idea behind this is to provide safety, to provide a safe experience for the customers in these public vehicles. And those vehicles who are older, the state government will have to give a time on which these old vehicle owners will have to install these vehicle locational tracking device and the emergency button in their vehicles. Now, Seychelles has recently became the first country in the world to issue a blue bond. So it has issued a blue bond, and the money which will be raised from blue bond, that will be used for protecting the marine areas, to protect the fisheries, for the development of fisheries, for the development of the blue economy. So this bond is partially guaranteed by the World Bank, and partially it will be supported by the Global Environment Facility, which means when the money will have to be repaid by the Seychelles, some of it will be repaid by the World Bank and some of it will be repaid by the global environment facilities. Last news is that US has agreed to grant India waiver from Iran oil sanctions. So US has said that India can trade oil from Iran, and it will not have sanctions, it will not face sanctions. So it has exempted 8 countries: Japan, India, South Korea, and 4 more countries from buying oil from Iran. But it says that in long run it will have to end all the dependence from Iran in buying of oil. But in short term it has been given waiver, which means India can buy oil from Iran. So this ends the pre-issues of the week. We will meet next week. Thank you.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update from Civil State.